Hey guys, welcome back to Total Tactics Football. It's Fran here once again, and I'll be guiding you through a wildcard stroke limitless kind of team selection. What I've provided here is a limitless team first, and I will once again be discussing, differential picks and picks that you can kind of budget down with later in the video. But let's first go through the limitless picks and kind of let me describe why I've gone for this specific team and why it makes sense at this stage in the tournament as well. First of all, I would like to say that, limitless is a bit weird to kind of go through at this point in time in the tournament because that kind of might set you up in a poor kind of situation for the final, right? Because if your team um, is in need of transfers right now, you have five free transfers to kind of make those choices, right? And you won't have those five free transfers when you get to the final. And it might be the case that, when you return from this week and the limitless coming ahead from the semifinals, that your team for the final is going to be super weak. So you need to think about that if you want to use limitless now. If you want to use limitless in the finals, please go ahead and do that. If you have wildcard right now, then let's go through a wildcard kind of selection as well. And we can use this kind of basis of this limitless team to kind of downgrade upon. But okay, let's look at the limitless team now. The reason why I've gone for the three forwards that I picked is because, simply put, I think the Danish team will really struggle to kind of create shot creating opportunities versus the English team. And even though I have already kind of expressed my kind of interest in having Dolberg in my team, or in kind of limitless teams potentially, I don't think it makes sense to play versus this English team. They found their kind of shooting form and their ability to kind of control the game and control the tempo, and also their ability to play versus the back five. I think is very scary right now. They've just beaten two teams who orchestrated a back five. We saw Ukraine immediately move out of the back five structure, and they showed a little bit of more brilliance, I think, in the second half. But it also meant that they were open to more kind of spaces in behind on the second. And ultimately, it didn't really work out, right? So this English team has shown a lot of tactical resilience and flexibility, and for that reason, it makes sense to have five, even six English players at this point, and then kind of having more of the kind of like split between like maybe four Italian picks, four Spanish picks on the other side of the bracket, and for that reason, I only have Mala here from Denmark. Kane, we know, is someone who is 100% going to start. He's finally found his form in the tournament, and I would 100% have him in your team. The next player that I would have is going to be Sterling. Sterling is that kind of player who has been talismanic for England this whole tournament. There's no reason to not have him in your team. At this point, anyone else in terms of the English midfield would be differentials. And I think that kind of leads me to Sancho, right? You might be questioning, why have I put Sancho here? He's only played one game for England. But I think that there are kind of three reasons for that. First of all, Gareth Southgate explained that Sancho was actually picked as a tactical decision. Tactical decision based on the fact that he expected Ukraine to kind of operate from a back five. And what did Ukraine do today? They operated with a back five, and Sancho started as a result. Sancho, for me, actually had a wonderful game, and I think I can see him playing once again another game for England, and him kind of improving his level of comfort and confidence as well is what this English team will probably need, I think, going forwards. And I think he's shown a little bit more than Foden, for example. And I think with Saka having a knock and maybe Grealish not being so pronounced on the right wing, it makes sense now to actually kind of have that kind of Sterling Sancho double winger threat. And I think if you want to have that kind of differential option, Sancho becomes that in your limitless team. But you can obviously budget down and maybe look at alternate players later. Outside of the English team, I think, just quickly talking about the defense, I think the priority clearly goes Shaw, then Maguire, then Stones. And then you kind of have Pickford. But, I think at this point in the tournament, like the best keeper, once again, is Pickford, as I mentioned last week. You're going to have him for sure. So maybe you don't want to have like four English defenders, right? Like that could be a little bit of a risk, especially if the Danes get one goal. And, even though the English side has been in iron rock, they've still made a few mistakes today. We saw, for example, a few kind of lackadaisical kind of errors from Kyle Walker, for example, where I think if there was a slightly pacier player in the front line for Ukraine, which the Danes actually do have, in my opinion, someone like Poulsen, for example, is very fast. Someone like Damsgaard is very fast as well. And for that reason, I think, yeah, they might struggle to keep a clean sheet. It's so demanding, I think, in that sense. And, you know, like it's the margins are so fine here. I mean, four English defenders is a big gamble. But let's move on to the Spanish players. I think Jordi Alba makes a lot of sense here tactically. Jordi Alba is the clear focal point in terms of almost being like a left inside forward when Spain kind of move and transition to attack. Someone like Pedri drops a little bit deeper into the field and looks for a pass in between the lines with Jordi Alba. And I think it makes sense to have Jordi Alba. Yes, kind of like fortunately maybe got an assist to the own goal the other day. But ultimately, he's been there all the time in terms of creating cutbacks and in terms of creating opportunities for the Spanish team, much more so than Azpilicueta, who drops a little bit deeper and kind of looks for these late oncoming runs to support the Spanish play. And then I think the reason why I've actually picked Laporte over Azpilicueta is simply because I've seen a lot of chance creation opportunities for Laporte. And I think the way that Italy play is very open in the midfield because they try to kind of create plays through the wings and they try to transition very quickly from attack to defense. And that means that, the attacking structure is going to be more of a zonal thing. Players aren't going to be stuck into position with the exception of Jorginho. And I can see, for example, Laporte maybe drifting inside, as he very much does for the Spanish team. And you can see with the statistics as well. And then looking for that final ball, because that's what he's been attempting many times. And it is very close to getting off. And if you watch the Swiss game, you would kind of know what I'm talking about. He's also had a kind of a header goal as well, the same way that Azpilicueta had one. So I think it kind of makes sense at this point to kind of have Laporte if you want to double up on the Spanish defense, or especially since I think, dropping Spinazzola, you now have maybe weaker fullback options on the Italian team, and it kind of makes less sense to have an Italian defender. If we go back to Torres, I think Ferran Torres is someone I actually prefer over Sarabia. If you're going limitless, if you want to budget down, you can go for someone like Sarabia. You might even want to look for Olmo, but once again, just rely on the fact that you'll be able to see the kind of Italian versus Spain team selection like later on in the tournament, right? So in deadline day, I mean, all you have to do is kind of look for the lineups and actually make a decision based on that. You might want to change Insigne or Chiesa if someone gets brought in, like someone like Berardi, for example. But for right now, I would pick Insigne and Chiesa. I think Insigne actually attacks at the Spanish defense, in a very threatening manner, because I think if you have Azpilicueta starting as a right back, he really struggles with a technical pacey winger, someone like Orsic. And Orsic is that kind of threat that I think can either, cut inside sometimes, go for a finesse shot, the same way that Insigne attempted versus Belgium, or, kind of beat his man down the line and kind of look for a cross. And Insigne is capable of both these things, and he's an elite player. And I think this is going to be a kind of tricky option for Azpilicueta to deal with. Chiesa is someone who I think can exploit the space in behind, because think about it tactically. Jordi Alba is someone who pushes forward. Therefore, in transition, sometimes you can catch the Spanish team off guard, for example, in that kind of left, kind of back sort of zonal area, right, where Chiesa can run in behind, because he's such a fast player and quite technical too, and he always tries to challenge the keeper whatever opportunity he has. So he has that option to do that, and he becomes very strong in that aspect. As I said, I think the other picks make a lot of sense, but if we wanted to budget down a bit, I mean, I could reduce Sancho back to Sarabia, and I could drop Insigne for someone like Højbjerg. Maybe you could actually also reduce Højbjerg to a full budget option and then go for kind of Insigne as well. But I think this is like the most kind of spread out way of I think each person in your team having a good individual opportunity to kind of create in the game. You could maybe change Laporte to an Italian defender if you actually prefer the Italians as well. But that's kind of my wildcard stroke limitless team selection. Now, if we actually look at some more differential picks as well, I've provided a spreadsheet, which I will also provide for the other video that I intend to make for the no-chip players. But simply put, this is the kind of spreadsheet where I'm kind of showing some more differentials. And we can talk about some of the differentials that I didn't mention in the initial team selection, right? So I think it's going to be Moreno as the forwards. I don't really like Moreno very much. Simply put, I think he's wasted a lot of chances in the tournament. I think it's clear that Luis Enrique kind of rested Morata so he could play more in this kind of very important game versus Italy. And yep, I think that's it. Dani Olmo, once again, as I say, wait for the Spanish lineups to come out. This guy is probably the third best winger choice I think that Spain have in their arsenal. And as long as Sarabia is fit, I think he does play a bench role. But we've seen great opportunities from him created from the bench and coming off the bench rather. And as I said, with the Spain and Italy game becoming so open, what's actually interesting is I think that means that players like Barella, who actually looks to run off the ball, run into zonal areas that are kind of unmarked or open, means that Barella gets to exploit those opportunities very much like he did versus the Belgium side. And he actually has a very great eye for goal in terms of his finishing capabilities and also his assisting capabilities when he's in the final third. The other two differential options, in my opinion, are going to be Pedri and Veratti. The reason why is because with a more open game, you can find much more opportunities for these very technical midfielders who are not necessarily defensive mids, but rather deep line playmakers, right? These two players can actually find that kind of pin perfect pass and kind of find that assist the same way that Veratti did, for example, versus Wales. And I think Pedri has the opportunity to do that, even though he's not actually kind of got onto the board so far in the tournament. Like, I think his statistics very much support the fact that he is quintessential to the Spanish play. And, it really just takes one chance in these very kind of tight games. And it could be someone like a deep line playmaker who can actually open the game up for you. As I said, I don't really like Damsgaard and Højbjerg at this point, unless it's just for budgeting reasons and you still wanting to go for a pick that kind of makes sense, that still attacks and supports their team. Jadon Sancho, as I mentioned, is a very interesting differential. I think Mason Mount actually makes a little bit more sense, but he probably has less risk in terms of his attacking dividends, right? So someone like Mason Mount is cheaper than Sancho as well, I think. And also, let's just have a look very quickly. Mount. Yes, Mount is also a cheaper option than Sancho, and that makes him interesting, right, in terms of kind of flexing your budget with a wild card right now. And then on top of that, I think Mount has the kind of set piece opportunities from the right-hand side of the field. We see Luke Shaw taking set pieces from the left, but Mount clearly has that kind of priority on the right, and we saw, for example, Henderson get a goal today, which Mount got an assist from. And it's clear that England have kind of worked on their set pieces, and they have the kind of structure in place. They don't need Trippier to kind of have set pieces. You have Mount and you have Shaw, and I think they're set in that sense. So I think Mount makes sense if you want to have another kind of accompanying midfielder to Sterling. Differentials, as I mentioned, I don't really like the Italian fullbacks. I think, first of all, Emerson will attack, but I think he's not a very good chance creator, and I think Di Lorenzo is a little bit more defensive. I like Laporte as another option, which is why he kind of sits in my team right now. And we've discussed all the English defenders. They're clearly all priority options, I think, to have. And you could maybe also flex into Unai Simon in terms of keepers, but I wouldn't touch Schmeichel. But Unai Simon is really just a pick that you kind of go with if you think the Spanish team will win. But other than that, I think that's going to be the wildcard stroke limitless video done. I hope you guys had a wonderful week this week. I think we all did here over the channel in our kind of community. Once again, thank you guys so much for your support on the live streams, on the channel, with the comments. If you guys have any questions, feel free to kind of drop them below. I'll respond to them as soon as possible. I wish you guys well and take care. Also, remember to like and subscribe.